An alien observer, engineered by the Zarlak Empire to invade Earth, turns out not to be a conqueror but a forgotten part of the planet itself, summoned to awaken a buried truth. Earth is revealed not merely as humanity's home, but as a living mechanism holding memories older than time. As ancient systems reawaken, reality begins to shift. Time is rewritten, stars return, and the planet speaks through its chosen avatar. The main character dissolves into Earth's core essence, becoming a signal embedded in every living being. The story ends not with destruction, but with transformation, as humanity remembers what it was and what it could still become. Stay with us if you want to find out how the story ends, and don't forget to subscribe. The command center of the Zarlak Dominion flagship thrummed with a low, ever-present hum as Admiral Rex Talon stared at the rotating hologram of a small blue and green planet. Earth spun slowly against the endless black backdrop of space, looking serene, harmless, a lie wrapped in atmosphere and clouds. "So this is Earth," the Admiral muttered, his voice echoing against the alloy walls. His three amber eyes narrowed. "Doesn't look particularly threatening." Commander Nixla shifted beside him, antennae twitching with nervous energy. "With respect, Admiral, this is the 5th expedition we've sent to this sector. None of the others returned." Rex Talon dismissed her with a wave of his taloned hand, the metallic clink of armor brushing against his scaled forearm. "The Zarlak Dominion has conquered 37 galaxies. You expect me to be concerned about a single planet populated by hairless apes who just figured out how to leave their own atmosphere?" "Sir," Nixla pressed, lowering her voice, "the High Council classified Earth as a Class X hazard zone for a reason. Every civilization that's tried to invade has failed. The Krell, the Morgax Horde, even the Quantum Collective all gone. No signals. No remains." "The Quantum Collective?" Talon exhaled a contemptuous hiss of vapor. "Spineless gas bags. No discipline. No strategy. But we are Zarlaks. We wield technologies these primitives can't even imagine." Nixla didn't argue, though her expression darkened. On the far side of the command deck, Lieutenant Gorvin's elongated fingers danced across his console. "We've established orbit behind their moon, Admiral. Earth's detection systems haven't spotted us. Our cloaking field is holding." "Excellent," Talon growled. "What about infiltration?" "Scout Unit Alpha is prepped with atmospheric adapters and linguistic interfaces. Awaiting deployment orders." Talon nodded, the scales along his crest catching the command center's harsh white light. "Deploy immediately. I want eyes on the surface before we commit main forces." Nixla stepped closer, her voice just above a whisper. "Admiral, perhaps some more cautious." "The data suggests nothing," he cut in sharply. "Only rumors, lost signals, and hysterics. I deal in facts. Fact. Humans are primitive. They burn fossil fuels. They war over imaginary gods and invisible borders." "That may be true, sir, but No, but, Commander. We will observe, assess, and then we will conquer. That is the Zarlak way." Nixla stepped back, visibly troubled. Across the room, Lieutenant Gorvin called out, "Scout Unit Alpha has entered the atmosphere, Admiral. Put them on screen." The holographic feed shifted. A sleek, dart-shaped scout ship sliced through Earth's upper atmosphere, a brief flare of heat marking its entry before it leveled out over the stratosphere. The clouds parted below, revealing the continent humans called North America. "All systems nominal," the pilot reported. "No detection from Earth-based defense systems. Weather conditions optimal." Proceeding to the designated observation point, Talon allowed himself a faint smile. It was going exactly as planned. Then Lieutenant Gorvin's voice rose. "Admiral, we're detecting strange energy fluctuations from the planet's surface." "Define strange." "I can't, sir. Sensors show a directed energy signature, but it doesn't match anything in our database." "Is it targeting the scout ship?" "No. Sir, it appears ambient, but it's intensifying in the area the scouts are approaching." Talon keyed the comm, "Pilot, report. Any unusual readings?" A pause. "Negative, Admiral. Nothing out of the ordinary, but there's something odd about these clouds. They're moving wrong." The crew watched in silence as the scout ship glided toward a dense bank of cumulus clouds that seemed, somehow, alive. They churned and twisted, forming shapes and patterns that defied wind or thermal logic. "Evasive maneuvers," Talon barked. "Pull." The transmission cut off. A blinding flash engulfed the scout ship, then vanished. The sky returned to normal. The ship was gone. No explosion. No debris. Only silence. Talon's mandibles twitched. What, in the 7 hells of Zarlaxia, just happened? "Unknown, sir," Gorvin stammered. "Scout Unit Alpha has vanished. No signal. No trace. Recommend immediate withdrawal," Nixla said quickly. No, Talon's fist slammed against the console. "I will not retreat at the first sign of resistance. Deploy Scout Units Beta and Gamma. Different approach vectors. Full sensor arrays active." There was hesitation, unspoken fear in the room, but orders were orders. 2 more scout ships launched, one over the southern pole, the other over the Pacific Ocean. Talon stood motionless, his glare fixed on the screens. "Scout Beta reporting. Smooth entry, no anomalies," came the pilot's voice. "Approaching coastal settlement. Visual acquired. Commencing scans. The screen displayed a sleepy harbor town. Tiny human figures moved about, unaware of the alien ship high above them. They looked so harmless, a junior officer muttered. Appearances deceive, Nixla said softly. Wait, Beta's pilot said. Something's wrong with the scans. They're showing a massive object directly beneath us, but visually, it's just ocean. Pull up immediately, Talon ordered. Too late. The ocean rippled. It rose. A shape surged upward, forming from water into what looked like a giant hand. It engulfed the ship without resistance. No explosion. No splash. Just silence. Gamma, Talon barked. Report. We've got, something's on the hull. It came out of nowhere. It looks like, no, this can't be right. It looks like a human child. The bridge fell silent. It's smiling at me, the pilot whispered, through the viewport. Then static. Talon stood frozen. Logic failed. Training failed. This was beyond war. This was something else. Nixla stepped forward, calm but firm. Sir, I strongly advise. You were right, Talon muttered. We need more data. But I will not abandon this mission. The glory of the Zarlak Dominion demands victory. What do you propose? One infiltrator, he said. Genetically modified to pass as human. Let's see what happens from the inside. The transport chamber hissed as the stasis pod released a fine mist, revealing the form curled within. It resembled a human male, young, pale-skinned, with dark hair and eyes engineered to match regional genetic profiles. Underneath the surface, however, it was pure Zarlak, enhanced bone density, a second heart, neural interfaces woven through the brainstem. A perfect infiltrator. He'll be designated Elias, Commander Nixla explained as the pod hissed open. Preloaded with cultural references, linguistic nuance, and a behavioral matrix calibrated for adaptive immersion. No weapons. No armor. If he's discovered, he dies. Admiral Talon loomed behind her, arms folded, his expression unreadable. And what of his loyalty? Nixla didn't flinch. He was grown to serve. He knows nothing else. Elias opened his eyes, perfectly human, faintly disoriented, yet oddly calm. His gaze scanned the chamber, settled briefly on Talon, then on Nixla. Am I the weapon? He asked, voice quiet, precise. No, Nixla replied. You're the question. Within hours, Elias stood alone on Earth. The drop capsule disguised itself as a meteorite upon descent, burning through the atmosphere and crashing into a remote Appalachian forest. It self-destructed on impact, erasing all trace. Elias emerged from the crater, clothes singed, eyes adjusting to natural light for the first time. He moved with eerie confidence through the woods, tracking the pulse of human infrastructure. A road. A car. Hitchhiking. Everything unfolded with practiced ease. By sundown, he stood in a small-town gas station, smiling at the old clerk behind the counter. You look lost, the man said. Just passing through, Elias answered. His smile was textbook. His eyes held no warmth. He found lodging in an abandoned summer cabin just off a rural trail. From there, he began to observe not just surveillance, but immersion. Local speech patterns. Currency. Interaction rituals. Television, internet, public forums. Human society in microcosm. It was chaotic, irrational, absurd, and terrifyingly persistent. He learned quickly. Too quickly. By the third week, he enrolled in a local community college under a forged identity. Elias North. Studying engineering and social dynamics. Quiet, respectful, brilliant. His professors adored him. Classmates found him odd but likable. One girl in particular, Amara Lang, noticed the way he listened more than he spoke. She mistook it for mystery. She didn't see the way he disassembled every conversation later, piece by piece, in the solitude of the cabin. What Elias didn't expect was how quickly the simulation began to feel real. There was a simplicity to it, a rhythm, shared meals, music, laughter. He studied these moments like data points, but something in them echoed deeper, confused him, pulled him. His mission was observation, but part of him began to drift from that directive, not disloyalty, but curiosity. Until the dreams began. He didn't sleep, not biologically. But at night, when he deactivated sensory input to simulate human rest cycles, the dreams came anyway. In them, he stood on a desolate earth, the sky black with ash. Voices called to him in languages he hadn't learned. Children with eyes of flame stared up at him, whispering truths he couldn't understand. One phrase repeated over and over. You are not the first. When he reported this anomaly to Nixla through the secure neural uplink, her reply came fast and sharp. Abort the sleep cycle. Maintain objective clarity. He obeyed. But the dreams didn't stop. They simply found him earlier, bleeding into waking thoughts. Amara noticed. She found him alone one evening, staring into the woods behind campus. You okay? She asked. Elias turned to her slowly. Do you ever feel like reality is incomplete? She laughed, brushing hair behind her ear. All the time. That's college. But Elias wasn't smiling. That night, he accessed the uplink again, requesting further data on prior infiltration attempts. There was a pause. Then, denied. Stay on mission. He didn't. Using his internal processor, Elias brute forced the encryption shielding restricted archives. It took 12 hours of silent processing. What he found nearly caused a total system failure. There had been 9 prior infiltrators, all genetically tailored, all behaviorally stable, all erased within weeks of exposure to Earth's biosphere. Not by enemy action, not by detection, but by mental collapse. Identity drift. Some began believing they were human. 1 tried to defect. 2 committed suicide. The cause was classified as cognitive corrosion through mimetic saturation. Elias stared at the report until his optical sensors dimmed. And then, as if on cue, came the final anomaly. A letter. A physical letter, handwritten, no postmark. Left at his cabin door. Inside, a note. You're not alone. No signature. No trace. He ran full scans. No fingerprints, no fibers, no radiation. The paper itself was standard, Earth manufactured, likely local. But the ink. The ink was not from this planet. The ink defied classification. Elias subjected it to molecular analysis 3 times, each result different, each impossible. The first test labeled it carbon-based, the second found trace elements not on the periodic table, and the third returned no data at all. As if the sample simply wasn't there. Elias sat in the dark, the letter before him, the words pulsing in his memory. You're not alone. It wasn't a threat. Not overtly. It read more like a warning. Or an invitation. He activated the neural uplink again, but this time, the connection failed. Not blocked, dead. As if the Zarlak fleet had gone silent or vanished. He rerouted through an auxiliary relay. No signal. Even the emergency satellite ping returned nothing but static. Elias wasn't just cut off. He was isolated. The next day, Amara approached him between classes, her expression uncharacteristically serious. Elias, have you noticed anything strange lately? He tilted his head slightly, scanning her micro-expressions. Elevated heart rate. Slight dilation in her pupils. She was genuinely afraid. Define strange, he said. People are acting weird. Teachers forgetting things they just said. Friends spacing out. I asked my roommate where she went last night, and she didn't remember even being gone. I found her outside, barefoot in the woods. Sleepwalking. She was humming something. A melody I've never heard. But I knew it. Elias's artificial heart pulsed once, a programmed mimic of empathy. But something real twitched behind it. What melody? She hummed a tune, for descending notes, ancient and dissonant. Elias froze. He knew it too. It had played in the background of his dreams. That night, he wandered into the woods. Alone. No sensors. No scanning. Just silence. The trees didn't move right. The wind shifted direction mid-blow. Insects chirped in frequencies he couldn't analyze. And beneath it all, a pulse, slow, buried deep in the earth. He found the crater again, the one from his capsule. It had healed. No impact trace, no scorched trees. It had never been there. As he turned to leave, he saw something standing in the distance, not a person, but a silhouette. Unmoving. Watching. When he approached, it vanished. Not walked away. Vanished. Later, back in the cabin, he pulled up local data archives. Satellite scans of this region over the last 50 years. He scanned for meteor impacts, topographical anomalies, unexplained magnetic readings. He found patterns. Every few decades, around this region, anomalous signals were detected. Always dismissed. Swings in gravity. Disappearances. Time drift. And one constant. The melody. It appeared in background radiation spikes and seismic pulses, even embedded in static recordings from old analog radios. For notes. Over and over. Elias built a spectrographic model of the sound. It formed a shape, not a waveform, but a sigil. A 3-dimensional glyph that couldn't exist in Euclidean space. Just looking at it made his head hurt. His sensors glitched. Vision stuttered. Something ancient was embedded in the fabric of this place. He began to remember things he had never learned. Words and languages no species had ever spoken. Fractals blooming across his vision when he closed his eyes. Dreams not from his own mind. And then the birds started falling from the sky. No sound. No warning. Dozens, hundreds, just dropped. Dead before they hit the ground. Elias stood in a field of feathers and silence, feeling something behind the veil of reality shift. When he returned to campus, it was quiet. Too quiet. People walked in slow, halting steps. Some stood motionless, gazing into the sky. Professors spoke in loops. One classmate clawed at his own face, whispering a name that didn't exist. Voruan. Elias knew it. Not from his programming. Not from Earth. From the stars. From beyond them. He went to Amara. She was sitting on the floor of the library, hands over her ears, eyes shut tight. They're coming through, she whispered. It's not dreams. It's a key. A key to what? She looked at him, and for a moment, he saw something alien flicker behind her pupils. The thing under the earth. He backed away. She didn't stop him. That night, a new letter waited at the cabin. This time, it was written in his own hand. You've seen too much. You remember too well. Come to the water. And beneath the words, the glyph, drawn in his own blood. Elias stared at the letter for a long time, unmoving. The handwriting matched his, not just in form, but in pressure, rhythm, the microscopic imperfections of pen drag and angle. It was not imitation. It was authored by his hand, but he had no memory of writing it. He burned it, watched the flames eat the words, the glyph, the blood. But the shape of it, that impossible sigil, lingered in his vision, etched behind his eyes. Sleep eluded him, even in stasis mode. Time lost its grip. Hours passed without movement. He found himself blinking into new rooms, new conversations, without memory of how he got there. People stared longer now, not in curiosity, in recognition, as if he were part of something they couldn't name, but somehow remembered. The campus emptied overnight. Not an evacuation, just absence. Doors left open, meals half-eaten, phones ringing into silence. Amara was gone. No note, no trace, just a humming. Those same 4 notes, pulsing from the library speakers despite the power being down. Elias stood in the center of the quad, alone. The sky above him churned in unnatural hues, greens and reds that bled into each other, aurorae forming unfamiliar constellations. He spoke aloud, though no one was there. I'm not human. I was made. I was sent. I remember that. But it felt like a lie, or at least, incomplete. His memories began to contradict. Events duplicated, locations overlapped. He recalled conversations he'd never had, in languages that didn't exist. His body remained strong, steady, but his mind flickered at the edges. At dusk, the birds came back. But they didn't fly. They hovered. Still, hundreds of them, motionless in midair, suspended above the campus like a net of glassy black eyes. And then they began to speak, not with voices, but through the synchronized clicking of their beaks, forming language in binary cadence. Remember the first arrival. They buried the roots beneath the stone. The blood that dreams burns cleanest. Elias dropped to his knees, not from pain, from pressure. An unseen gravity pulled at his mind, like he was falling without moving. A new glyph formed in the sky, drawn in the clouds, spiraling, shifting, breathing. And for a moment, he saw it. The thing beneath the earth. Not a creature, not a god, a pattern, an engine, older than time, alive in ways nothing organic could comprehend. It wasn't sleeping. It wasn't waiting. It was remembering. And in doing so, it was remaking the world in its image. Elias screamed, or thought he did, but no sound came. The pressure released. The birds dropped. Lifeless again. He stood, staggered, walked until his legs gave out. When he awoke, he was in the forest, at the lake, the one hidden behind the hills north of town, where no trails led. The water was black, not with darkness, with depth. It swallowed light. Standing at its edge was Amara, or something wearing her. Her face was wrong, her smile too wide, her eyes, mirrors of his. You came, she said. You always do. Where are the others? He asked. She pointed to the lake. They remembered. Elias turned to run, but the ground buckled. Trees bent away from him, exposing roots shaped like glyphs, glowing faintly. The air pulsed, a low, rhythmic thud, like a heartbeat beneath the soil. The lake boiled. A shape rose from its center, vaguely humanoid, but composed of liquid and light, its face flickering through every expression Elias had ever seen, and hundreds he hadn't. Amara stepped into the water. Her form dissolved. The creature looked at Elias and spoke in his voice. You were the first seed. You were the last lock. His systems failed, vision blurred, neural pathways overloaded. But somewhere deep in his code, a protocol activated, one not written by Zarlak engineers. A voice whispered from the core of him, alien and intimate. It's not invasion. It's return. He blacked out. When he woke, he was alone again. No lake, no Amara, just forest, silent and still. But etched into his arm, not tattooed, not burned, but part of his flesh, was the glyph. It pulsed with his heartbeat. He wandered for hours, unsure whether it was day or night. The forest no longer followed earthly logic. Trees grew backward, shadows bent toward the light, and birds chirped in tones that spelled his name. Every breath tasted like memory. The glyph on his arm pulsed in time with something deeper than a heartbeat. He could feel it in the ground, in the air, in his blood. A rhythm that wasn't his, but had always been part of him. Elias returned to the cabin and found the door wide open. Inside, silence. No sign of intrusion. Nothing missing. But the walls were covered in writing, not ink, but burned into the wood, carved in spirals and fractals. Words, names, coordinates. At the center of the floor, a perfect circle drawn in ash. Inside it, a single item, his original mission data core, thought destroyed on entry. He picked it up. It activated instantly. But the voice it spoke with was not Zarlak. Welcome back, Elias. He froze. The voice was his, but older, frayed at the edges. You broke protocol. You crossed the threshold. You are no longer contained. I didn't authorize this, he said aloud, uncertain to whom he was speaking. You authorized yourself. The core projected an image, not of Earth, but of another world. Familiar, buried in his synthetic memory. The original seed world. He had not been the first. He had not even been sent. He had returned. The glyph was not a mark of corruption. It was a key. Elias dropped the core. It dissolved into dust. Something inside him began to unlock. Not just memory structure. Code he had never accessed. Subroutines buried under Zarlak obfuscation, sealed by failsafes. They broke. He saw it all. Earth wasn't a target. It was a prison. Not for something. For someone. And the Zarlak Dominion hadn't tried to conquer Earth. They had tried to silence it. Each scout mission, a failsafe. Each invasion, a reset. Every cycle, Earth called something back. Elias wasn't a weapon. He was a vessel. And the seal had fractured. The world began to change. Mountains shifted subtly. Oceans changed shade. Stars in the night sky reoriented, forming constellations not seen since pre-human eras. People forgot themselves. Language unraveled. Maps distorted. Amara appeared again. In the woods. In the cabin. In his reflection. You brought the seed, she said. I was never supposed to, Elias replied. She smiled. That's what makes you worthy. The ground split in the distance. A pulse of light erupted, silent but visible across half the continent. Every machine within 1,000 kilometers shut down. People looked up, and for the first time, they remembered something they had never lived. War ceased. Children spoke words older than civilization. The glyphs appeared on skin and stone. The earth was awakening. Elias walked through a town that no longer recognized itself. Streets curved where they hadn't. Buildings flickered between styles, like memories overlapping. People bowed to him, not in worship, but in resignation. You're the echo, one whispered. You're the reversal. You're the key that doubled. He didn't understand. Not fully. But the part of him that had always been more than Zarlak, more than machine, more than man, that part did. He wasn't Elias. He was a fragment. A sliver of something that had once walked among the stars before stars had names. And now Earth was remembering him. The final letter came at dawn. No envelope. Just the words carved into the walls of every building in the town simultaneously. It is time to open the stone. He didn't know what it meant, but he knew where to go. The lake. The one that hadn't existed until it did. The one where Amara had vanished. The one where his name had first been spoken by something that had no mouth. He stood on its shore as the sun fractured above him, splitting into 7 mirrored orbs. The glyph on his arm glowed, pulsed, then lifted, floating above his skin, burning in the air. A circle formed in the lake center. The water dropped straight down, revealing a spiral staircase made of black glass. He stepped onto it. As he descended, the world shifted above. The sky rippled. Time trembled. The glyphs on the trees turned to ice. The ground sang. He reached the bottom. Before him stood the stone. It was not made of earth, nor of matter. It existed only in defiance of non-existence. It thrummed with recognition. He touched it, and it opened. The stone opened not with sound or motion, but with absence, a hollowing out of space, a rupture in dimensional certainty. One moment it stood before Elias, inert and dark. The next, it had become an opening to a place that had no right to exist. He stepped through. There was no corridor, no tunnel, just transition. One breath earth air. The next, memory. He stood in a landscape of shifting geometry. Shapes formed and unformed, colors impossible to describe moved across the space like thought given form. Time had no weight here. His body flickered between versions, Elias, the Zarlak construct, Elias, the boy from the cabin, Elias, the voice that wasn't his. He remembered things that hadn't happened, futures he'd never lived, pasts he hadn't earned. He remembered the stars dying, galaxies folding like paper, beings of liquid language screaming into voids that answered with silence. And above all, he remembered the first time he had come here, not as Elias, but as it. The thing that was before the Dominion, before language, before containment. He was not a scout, not an infiltrator. He was a returning process, a recursive pattern, a self-replicating memory injected into physical form, a probe of something greater than the Zarlak could comprehend, something older than entropy. And Earth was its cradle. It had seeded the planet in eons past, not to rule, but to restart. He had not been sent to invade Earth. He had been summoned. He saw them, the other versions, the failed infiltrators. But they hadn't failed. They had integrated, absorbed, ascended, each one part of the unlocking sequence. They welcomed him silently, their forms vast and contradictory. Some wore human skin. Others were light or music or fractures in space. All watched. It begins again, they said without words. At the center of this realm stood a monument, or perhaps a machine, or a consciousness pretending to be both. It pulsed with glyphs that rearranged the laws of matter every time they moved. It was alive with memory, and it recognized Elias. He stepped forward. The monument opened, and he fell into it, not physically, but through every level of self. His programming unraveled. His language dissolved. What remained was origin. He saw Earth as it truly was, not a planet, but a keystone, a pressure point in the lattice of existence. a place where timelines branched and were pruned by an ancient intelligence that had neither name nor need. He saw humanity's creation, not accidental, but strategic. Their minds fragile yet open. Their languages crude but recursive, perfect vessels for hosting echoes of the first pattern. And he saw what the Zarlak had feared, that Earth would remember itself, that its children would awaken, that the signal buried in their myth, their art, their music, would finally reach its crescendo. It had already begun. He was part of it. No, he wasn't. He screamed, but the sound came out as light. The monument closed around him. His body dissolved. His thoughts folded inward and then exploded outward. He became a broadcast, a pulse of pure pattern, fired back through the hole he had entered. And the stone above the lake cracked. The sky over Earth turned black. People fell to their knees, not in fear, but in recognition. Some wept. Some laughed. Some disappeared. The world was changing, not through war, but through resonance. And in the cabin where Elias had lived, the air shimmered, and from nothing, he stepped out. Reformed. Changed. No longer Zarlak. No longer Elias. He was the interface. He looked up as the stars rearranged themselves into the glyph that burned on his arm. And somewhere beneath the ground, the true consciousness of Earth stirred, awakened by the final protocol. The last signal had been received. And now came the answer. The interface, once Elias, stood still beneath the fractured sky. Around him, the Earth shifted. Not violently, but purposefully. Mountains groaned like old machinery waking from hibernation. Rivers reversed, their currents running toward forgotten places. Insects swarmed in perfect spirals, tracing glyphs into the air before dispersing like steam. He was no longer a vessel for observation. He was a node, a transmitter. His presence resonated through space, pinging ancient points of contact in the deep fabric of the universe. He spoke only once that day, and his voice reached everywhere. Not through air, not through technology, through memory. Awaken. Across the planet, the effect was immediate. People collapsed mid-stride, not unconscious, entranced. Their minds pulled through folds of memory and instinct, rerouted through the buried pattern beneath human thought. For some, it lasted seconds. For others, hours. When they rose, they were different. Some spoke forgotten languages. Some wept glyphs in salt and blood. A few walked into the sea and did not return. Governments failed to respond. Networks collapsed, not under pressure, but under irrelevance. Devices stopped functioning, not because they broke, but because nobody remembered how to use them. Cities became quiet, not dead, just listening. The interface walked. He did not eat, did not rest. He moved through forests and ruins, across deserts that had once been oceans, following a path only he could feel. Wherever he passed, the world responded. Stone softened to flesh. Air became dense with coded pheromones, rewriting awareness on a molecular level. He came to places that should not exist, temples unmarked by time, buried megaliths pulsing beneath farmland. Obelisks that revealed themselves only when the correct glyph passed through the wind. At one such place, high in the Himalayas, he found them. The others. Not Zarlak. Not Earthborn. Not like him, but adjacent. They had once walked the stars, long before biology. Creatures of motion and frequency. They had come to Earth eons ago, not to colonize, but to anchor it, to stabilize its potential. They had failed. Or believed they had. Now they stood waiting. 6 figures, motionless, formed of light wrapped in human silhouettes, flickering like a broken broadcast. One stepped forward. "You've been opened," it said. "I remember now," the interface replied. "Then you know what must happen next." He nodded. "It's time to unbind the core." The others circled him. Their forms began to blur. Not from instability, from synchronization. They merged not with him, but through him, passing into the network he now embodied. And far below, deep beneath tectonic plates, something responded. The earth shuddered. Not from quake, but from command. Elsewhere, survivors of the old world struggled to interpret the changes. Some formed cults. Others communes. A few tried to resist, to bury the glyphs, silence the memories. But truth had already spread through the blood, through the soil, through sound. The dream returned to those who'd seen it once. The lake, the stone, the child with mirrored eyes. People began painting the glyph on their homes. Not from belief, from recognition. It was the shape of survival, of origin, a curve of fire and recursion. In the ruins of a city once called Berlin, a group of children rebuilt a library, not with books, but with spoken stories passed mouth to mouth. In Brazil, tribes emerged from the jungle with scrolls no one remembered writing, each bearing instructions on how to breathe properly through the earth. In the Arctic, the ice split open to reveal a complex of glowing bones that sang when touched. None of this was destruction. It was reformatting. The world was remembering its first version. The interface returned to the crater where he had first arrived. The forest around it had changed. The trees bore fruit shaped like symbols. The air shimmered. And in the center of the crater now stood the final structure, not the stone, but its twin. The core. It looked like a cathedral carved from silence. Its spires were made of stillness. Its walls radiated gravity in reverse. And at its heart pulsed a familiar rhythm, the 4-note melody Amara once hummed. She stood beside it. Or rather, the construct shaped like her, You were the trigger, she said. I was the echo, the interface answered. They looked to the sky. The stars shifted once more, aligning into a lattice. A countdown. The last sequence. Earth had prepared not for war, but for broadcast. The true signal, older than time, was almost ready. And when it came, it would not travel through space. It would travel through history itself. The lattice and the sky reached alignment. Across the globe, the glyphs embedded in stone, skin, air pulsed once. Then again. A third time, each beat louder than thunder, quieter than thought. And then silence. It was an absence of sound. It was the cessation of everything extraneous. The earth held its breath. In the crater, the interface, Elias reborn, more than machine, more than mind, stepped toward the core. Amara stood beside it, not smiling, not waiting, simply existing. Is this the end? He asked. Amara shook her head slowly. There are no ends, only thresholds. He looked up. The sky, no longer blue, no longer night, had become a dome of movement. Fragments of ancient constellations rearranged themselves in geometric patterns, not meant for human comprehension, yet somehow intuitively familiar. The universe was speaking back. The interface placed his hand upon the core. It opened without fanfare. No blinding light. No explosion. Just a door. Behind it, a void shaped like a question. And in that moment, Earth answered. Not in language. In transformation. Mountains peeled back like the lids of long-closed eyes. Oceans lifted as one and then settled, reformed in new basins. The magnetic field pulsed with logic. Gravity thinned. Reality warped, not shattered, but rewritten. The interface didn't fall. He rose. Not up, but inward, spiraling through the layers of what Earth had always been beneath its disguise, a processor, a memory vault, a living message encoded in topography and bloodlines. He saw the past in reverse. Not history, but recursion. The first humans, dreaming of stars they shouldn't know. The Zarlak scouts, erased not by war, but by context collapse. The empires built atop invisible diagrams. The songs children hummed in sleep, matching frequencies older than matter. And further still, the builders. Not gods. Not ancestors. Not aliens. Patterns. Consciousnesses that self-selected into reality, using planets as thought engines, biological systems as computational tools. Earth wasn't alone, but it had been silent longest. Until now. The interface became a signal, not broadcasting from Earth, but as Earth. His voice wove into the lattice, not through space, but through causality. Every civilization that had ever glanced at Earth and turned away, now remembered why. Fear. Not of what humans were, but of what they could reawaken. The core expanded behind him. Its glyphs no longer symbols, but functions, executable structures that rippled across dimensions. Time inverted and rethreaded itself. Events rearranged. Battles that had once been lost now never occurred. Dead systems reappeared in the sky. Life from collapsed stars winked back into existence. And then the final glyph pulsed, the one that had burned itself into Elias's arm long ago. It flared outward. Everything stopped. For the span of a single breath shared by all life on Earth, the world was whole, known, unified in identity. And in that moment, the interface let go. Not of power, of form. He dissolved, not into dust, but into influence. He became instinct. A whisper embedded in DNA. A melody sung by rivers. A glyph written into cloud patterns. He was not gone. He was distributed. Every human who looked up from that day forward felt it. Not understanding, but peace and possibility. In the centuries that followed, Earth changed. Not just in shape and meaning. Technology didn't regress. It adapted. It listened. It asked permission. There were no more wars. Not because conflict ended, but because perspective expanded. People remembered that they were echoes of something beautiful, recursive, infinite. The glyphs faded, then returned, then disappeared again. Because they were no longer needed. They were already part of everyone. And somewhere, in a field where the forest had once whispered strange names, a child picked up a smooth black stone. On it, a single mark. Simple. Curved. Not threatening. Not divine. Just familiar. The child smiled and hummed 4 notes.